Welcome to the LDHR podcast, where ministry leaders grow together. Over the next few months, we will be releasing episodes intermittently alongside our other series to talk about growing on purpose, highlighting the people and pathways for growing where you are and with what you've been entrusted. Through these episodes, you'll hear from people with insights and practical steps that you can apply right away. You'll also have the opportunity to find out more about the resources that are available to you and how you can intentionally grow on purpose wherever God has you. Come on in and listen. We're so glad you're here. Well, Roger Osbaldiston, welcome to the LDHR podcast. I am so glad you're able to join me today. To start off, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself? Namely, maybe your journey with Crew, and then where you are currently living and working.
Yeah, thank you, Beth. It's great to be with you. And it's really fantastic to have this opportunity to talk about Working Genius, but also say hi to my friends at Crew. I spent 35 years in full-time ministry with Crew in different roles. So starting on university campus as a student and then served in New Zealand for many years. So I'm currently living in Auckland, New Zealand. But my time with Crew took me through different roles, including a number of years on the global executive team and working with student movements and with leader impact. Today, I now work for a church network. So I'm leading a network of just over 100 churches around New Zealand. So a little bit of a different season of life for us. But I'm actually still a volunteer with Crew, and I'm actually still in the Crew office here in New Zealand. It's called Tandem Ministries. So I haven't gone very far. Love the ministry. It's great to be able to have this opportunity to connect as well.
Well, that's great. Well, thank you so much for joining us and coming back and sharing a little bit more with Crew. And as you already mentioned, today we are going to be talking about the Working Genius. We've been doing a series called Growing on Purpose. And today we are going to look at this tool. It's kind of a newer tool out there. Maybe some people have gotten to use it. Maybe others haven't even heard of it. So for those who may not be familiar, how would you describe Working Genius? And what first drew you to it personally?
I'm, probably like many people who've been around for a while, and especially in an organization like Crew that's really, has a strong emphasis on leadership development and growing. I've done a number of different assessments, tests for personality, for working style and team development. So I actually have a whole box file of different things I've gathered over the years. But about 4 or 5 years ago, a Canadian friend introduced me to Working Genius. He said, "Oh, you really need to have a look at this." And so he did an assessment for me and we talked about it together. And it picks up a lot of the commonalities from other tests. But the thing that really drew me to it was its simplicity. It's really simple. And I'm kind of a simple person. And I just love that I could remember it really clearly. But the second thing about it that really stood out to me was that it was immediately applicable to work, and especially teamwork. So that was probably what really, drew me to it initially. Yes, I've had the chance to work with about 30 different teams now. Still volunteer with Crew and do Working Genius with most of the teams here in New Zealand. But I've also used it with church groups, corporate groups, and other ministries and nonprofits. Kind of applicable across almost any industry or type of work. So those are probably the things that really drew me to it.
Yeah, I love that you said it's very simplistic. And I believe there are 6 geniuses, right? Maybe we could just walk through those really quick for people to know what they are. What are the 6 geniuses?
Yeah, so the 6 Working Geniuses, I should take a little bit of a step back. I mentioned it's really applicable to work. And so it came from actually 3 components of work. And then they began to think about the skill sets, or geniuses as they call them, that apply to different stages of work. And if we think about any stage of any work project, and so this could be daily work, it could also apply to community groups, church groups, or even planning a family holiday. So often these things start with first stage of any process is usually ideation, like having the idea, coming up with the idea, what is it that we're going to do. The next stage is what they call activation, where you have an idea and then you kind of decide, okay, we're going to do this, we're going to put the plans in place, we're going to take those steps forward. So if it's a family holiday, someone said, hey, I'd love to go to the beach for a holiday. And then the family decides, okay, we're going to do that. So we're going to book the tickets, we're going to get organized, ready to go. Then the last stage is implementation, actually going on the holiday. So you actually get there, you get things done. And so there's those three stages. So ideation, activation, and implementation. And those are the stages of work that you can really apply to any process. So a large company, organization has ideation. It comes up with different ideas and things it wants to do. Then it works out, are we going to do these different things? And then it puts them into practice. The tool was developed by Patrick Lencioni. People might be familiar with him from the 5 dysfunctions of a team, the ideal team player. And over time, his team noticed that those 3 main phases of work, that in each of those, there were 2 kind of skill sets or geniuses, they call them, that apply to each of those stages. So in the ideation phase, there's 2 geniuses that are in that stage, and they are wonder and invention. And Working Genius spells widget, W-I-D-G-E-T. So the first 2 are wonder, there's the W, and then the I is invention. And that's in the ideation phase. So wonder is really those people who are having new ideas. They're always thinking, dreaming. I've got wonder, so I've got a new idea every 5 minutes. But the next stage is invention, and it really takes those kind of ideas that may be sort of up in the clouds and designs them to a more understandable component. So think about an architect building a house. And so I might dream up an idea for a house, but the architect needs to be able to go to the next stage and actually draw up the plans. What's it going to look like? How's it going to work? So invention is really making that idea more concrete and practical. So that's the ideation phase, sort of the big idea, and then what is it going to look like? The next stage is the activation stage. And this kind of surprised me a little bit because we often think about you have the idea and then you skip to implementation.
Right.
But the activation stage is D and G, so discernment and galvanize. So discernment is where you actually decide if it's a good idea. You ask all those questions: what, when, where, how, why. And so it's really discernment to those ideas. And then galvanize is the 4th one. And that's where you decide, okay, we're going to go for this. And then we're going to rally our team together. We're going to galvanize the family on the holiday or team for this work. And so the persuasive type comes out of people who are like galvanizing people towards this idea. Just a little bit of an insight for our family. I mentioned I have wonder, but I also have galvanize. And so often I will be like, hey, I've got a great idea. And then I skip to galvanize. So let's do it. And I'll be galvanizing people around the idea. My wife has discernment and invention. So she steps in and she's like, well, what's the idea and how does it work? And she's asking all these questions and she wants clarity around it. And Working Genius really helped us in our relationship because I realized she's not just being difficult, asking lots of hard questions. She actually just wants to know what this is going to look like. And then she's really good at helping decide if this is a good idea or not. And, we've moved house 14 times since we've been married.
Wow.
And partly that's because I'm like, wonder, hey, what would it be like to go and live over there? And then I galvanize. And so we've kind of learned that if I just slow down and listen to her more often, we maybe wouldn't have moved house so many times. And so that's been really helpful for us. So that's the first 4. The last stage is implementation. And there's 2 geniuses that relate to the last stage, and that is enablement and tenacity. So a lot of leaders who get to galvanize, they think, if I just kind of rally the troops, galvanize them, say, let's go team, that they'll know what to do. And so the enablement skill is being able to come alongside the ideas and the team and say, I can really help us. I can actually work on the how-tos. I can help people. So people with coaching skills, encouragement skills, supervising skills, the enablement genius kind of picks those up. And then the final one is tenacity. And without the tenacity people, nothing gets done. It's that phase where people with tenacity just love to get things done. They're the ones that want to check off all the things that we've done, make sure we've completed things properly. And so that's kind of the spectrum. So wonder, invention, discernment, galvanize, enablement, and tenacity.
Great. Thanks so much for walking through that with us. That just gives us a really good picture and the framework that we are working with. There's a lot of tools out there. You even mentioned at the beginning, working with crew, you have this whole file folder of all these different assessments, tools that you've used, things like Strengths Finders, Berkman, Myers-Briggs. What do you think sets Working Genius apart, especially in how it helps people function day to day?
All those ones you've mentioned, I've done all of those and appreciate the different insights they have. And I think all of them have a specific insight. So it's not that one is better than the other. What I've liked about Working Genius, its probably unique contribution is that it's simple and it's immediately applicable to work. So Where that is really helpful was thinking about teams. Teams often resonate right away with it because it's not just a personality test or a style test that's more, I can see how that applies to me as an individual. The uniqueness is you can immediately see how it can apply to your team and how your team could function together with it. The way that then common understanding. So teams will come away from a 2 or 3 hour workshop and they will be able to do it in one session. They'll be able to see their team on a map on one page, be able to remember the geniuses of most of their team members, unless it's like a massive team, but sort of an average sized team. Then people can kind of remember each other and it creates a common language for that. So I think that's probably the uniqueness of it. It doesn't pretend to be as deep or sophisticated as some of the other tools on a particular area. It's more of an overview tool. And immediately people get kind of a big picture or overview of how their team works together.
Thanks for giving us the big picture and walking us through the 6 geniuses. It's simple and applicable. Adding to what you shared, I think Wonder also likes to ask those big picture questions like, why are things the way they are? Yeah. What's a common aha moment people tend to have when they go through this for the first time?
Yeah, I think so. What people do, if you're doing the assessment, it's about a 10-minute online assessment. And all it does is ask you a bunch of questions. And essentially, through that process, you reveal your preferences for different stages of work. So I mentioned the different 3 stages of work and then the 6 geniuses and how they apply to those. The questions just get you to effectively rank what you really prefer doing and are good at compared to what you're frustrated at. You do the 10-minute test and then it ranks those 6 things. So you end up with 2 top scores that become your geniuses. Then you have 2 bottom scores, which are your frustrations. So your geniuses are things that you can do well, but also derive energy and joy from them. Your frustrations, you maybe don't enjoy them as much and maybe you don't do them as well. And then you end up with 2 middle scores, and they talk about those as your competencies. So you might be able to do those 2 just as well, but you maybe don't enjoy them as much as you would with your geniuses, and they don't frustrate you as much as you would with your frustrations. So people are essentially just ranking them on a scale of 1 to 6, which ones they prefer, which ones they feel good at, and which ones frustrate them the most. So in terms of the aha moments, it really is people look at it and they go, I just resonate with this. So it explains behavior. So people often come out of it and they go, is that why I do what I do? Or is that why I don't like that? So my wife works with a lot of entrepreneurs and often solo entrepreneurs who are starting a business. And she had me do a workshop with them, with a group of them one day. And the main aha moment is some of them are entrepreneurs. So they're real ideas people and love to have an idea and put it into practice. But they're really, a number of them were weak on the tenacity, like getting it done stage. And so the aha moment was like, so actually my genius is the ideas and the galvanizing component. So I don't need to feel guilty about the fact that I'm not a get it done person. And so one of the aha moments for them was, I can outsource that. I can actually hire someone. Maybe my next step in my business is to hire a part-time administrator to pick up those pieces because that's not my skill set. And so it really explains behavior. And often that's what happens in teams. There's often a team aha moment as well when teams kind of see, that's why you do what you do, why we appreciate that, but also sometimes why that frustrates us. So it kind of gives those sort of moments of explaining behavior.
Those are great examples of aha moments. And you use the word guilt in there, which makes me want to ask, one of Working Genius's claims is that it helps reduce guilt and judgment on teams. What does that actually look like in real life?
That is a really great part of it, is essentially it's helping understanding. And I really like, this is not, it doesn't come from a scriptural or Bible format, but there are some connections we can make. And obviously in spiritual sense, we talk about spiritual gifts, that we're all gifted in different areas. And 1 Corinthians 12 talks about, that we're all part of one body and not one part is more needed than another. And so I think when it comes to guilt and judgment, it's sometimes we can feel like, I'm just not good at this particular area. And so we can feel guilty about, I mentioned those entrepreneurs who felt like it's not good at getting things done. I've got all the ideas and I can put them into practice. But when it comes to, the bookkeeping and calendar and managing those things, I'm just not good at those. And so they were all feeling guilty that they weren't good at that. But then when they realize, actually, that's not what I bring to this business, they can then bring along others into that space. And so it really helps. On a team, you have people who just love getting stuff done and they might feel guilty. I get dragged into these brainstorming sessions. The other people just seem so much more creative than me. And so they can feel guilty about that. But also when it applies to other people, as humans, we tend to be a little bit easier on ourselves and harder on other people. I mean, sometimes that's true. Sometimes we can be really hard on ourselves and give other people a free ride, but sometimes it results in judgment. So, we look at someone and we go, "So we're trying to get stuff done here, and this person's always coming up with new ideas." And I just that really annoys me and frustrates me. And so we can become judgmental of other people's particular strengths or genius. And so the tool helps us kind of appreciate as a team where we sit on that spectrum. And so it can reduce the amount of guilt we feel as individuals, but also the amount of judgment we project on other people. And really, that's just, a lot of these tools do help us gain understanding of each other. And when we understand each other better, we tend to be a bit less judgmental. I've got Wonder and Galvanize. So I have these ideas and then I present them to my team and I try and galvanize them. I had a great new strategic plan idea and I put it in front of our team. And then my team were like, "Roger, that's not such a great idea." And I'd kind of skipped through the invention and discernment part. I'd gone from, "Hey, this is my new idea. Let's do it, team." And the team was like, "Hang on." And they asking all these questions. And I kind of realized that they weren't asking those questions just to be difficult. That was my first thought. But really, they were just asking questions. "Oh, how's this going to work?" They were asking invention and then discernment questions, which kind of frustrate me. But that was what needed to happen. And so it really kind of slows a team down to think through, how is this idea going to work? What's it going to look like in practice? Is it a good idea? And so then the ideas that you choose to galvanize are ones that your team has processed and worked together on. And that's been really helpful for me as a leader, not to be judgmental of team members who are asking good questions.
Yeah. I think that is so helpful. Like they were just using their that discernment, to ask those refining questions to some of that wonder, some of the ideas that you had come up with. And when you don't have a common language, like you said, that can feel really frustrating. But what is freeing, as you said, when you understand, they're like, "I'm just bringing my D here. Like, I think you're onto something, but let's just make it better." Yeah, I can see how that can help reduce some of that guilt and that judgment that we can have toward other people.
I'm working on a new team now. So I'm leading a new team in a different environment, in a church environment. And we did Working Genius together last year. One of them has D for a genius. And it was a real aha moment because that person is kind of known as the team as the one who asks lots of questions. The team get frustrated with him because this person always seems to be, they might see it as someone who's trying to block progress. But actually, they're just using their genius and they're asking good questions. And they're the only one on the team who has that skill set. We're in a discernment process. We need to actually slow down and listen to them because they've thought through things or asking different sets of questions that everybody else is not asking.
That's really helpful to know, especially if they're the only one. You can realize, oh, yeah, you are bringing this and we actually really need this. And you can tap into that and recognize what they're doing. They say Working Genius is 20% personality tool and 80% a productivity tool. What does that mean? And how does it shape the way a team gets work done?
Yes, I think that's part of what I mentioned earlier about, it's a 10-minute test that you do online and it gives you a glimpse into your personality and your style, but it's really more of a big picture tool. So it's not intending to be a detailed personality assessment or tool like some of the others are. And that's probably why they say it's 20% personality and 80% productivity. So it really gets you to do an overview picture of your style, and personality only comes out so much as your preferences in terms of how you are created and your natural abilities and what you like doing and what you're good at. So it only kind of picks up that side of it and it thinks about the areas that are immediately applicable to a work or team environment. And so that's where I think it's different, perhaps to some of the other tests. So if you want something that's a bit more detailed, that goes into more personality style, some of the other tests might be more useful. What I like about it is you don't need to do a whole lot of other ways to make a test kind of fit a team context. It immediately applies into a team context. And so it begins to shape teamwork by thinking about what are the roles on a team. If you think about the 6 different areas and the different stages of work, one of the most helpful things can then look at team map. When you do the assessment, the Working Genius assessment, then you put people together in a team and you can print a team map. And so it pulls out a map that shows the 6 different areas of genius and then where everybody sits in terms of your genius and frustrations. So it kind of shows the geniuses in green and the frustrations in red. So you can kind of see immediately where people sit. And so you can look at the map and you can go, "Oh, our team's got lots of people in the creative space, but not many in the tenacity." So then the team can look at it and go, "This is why we tend to talk around about a lot of ideas, but never actually get anything done." Or flip side of that, I did Working Genius with a group of lawyers. So it was about 15 lawyers in a firm and I did Working Genius with. And it was fascinating. Most of them were enablement and tenacity.
Mm.
because they're not about being creative. You don't really want necessarily always a creative lawyer. Now, sometimes you want, but you want someone who knows what the law is and how it applies to the situation, who's really key on detail,
Mhm.
and someone who can get stuff done for you. It didn't surprise me that they all came out as enablement and tenacity. And so you can look at different industries, and sometimes the profile tends to fit that industry a little bit different. So when we've done this with ministry ones, and especially crew teams, crew is overweighted in the discernment and galvanize space,
Mm.
which kind of makes sense because we're really big on the spiritual side. We want to know spiritually discerning. We want to know that things are correct and right. And then crew has tended to attract a lot of people who are good at galvanizing people. We're always recruiting people to our support teams, ministry partners. We're recruiting to conferences, events. We're encouraging people to come along to evangelistic outreaches. And so we've tended to attract a lot of people who are really good at often discernment and galvanize. That also means as a whole, maybe we're a bit weaker on the wonder and invention side. So people who are like really creative and come up with new ideas, they'll often struggle with people who will say, yeah, but we've been doing this for 70 years and this is how we do it. This is what we've always done. And so we're a little bit weaker on that top side. And then we're also a little bit weaker on the get it done side. So we tend to have people who are more discernment and galvanize and love kind of being with people and connecting with them. We are quite good on the enablement as well. That would be, we love to come alongside people, coach and disciple, but sometimes we tend to lack people who've got tenacity and just get things done at the end of the week. Do we manage to expense reports or weekly stats reports or some of those sort of things?
Yeah.
So it's interesting looking at different industries and different ministries, and you could probably see a little bit of the strengths. But that also points you to the areas that you need to pay attention to at times.
That's really fascinating, thinking of an industry or organization as a whole and what they tend to have. And again, we have lots of variety, lots of people with lots of different geniuses across the board, but that is really fascinating. So some people wonder if there's an ideal working genius profile for leaders. What would you say to that?
That's a really good question because you naturally potentially think, there'd be certain skill sets. But the answer is actually no. And I think it's no because you can actually lead from any combination of geniuses. So when you get your assessment, your geniuses don't line up in order necessarily. So I mentioned I've got wonder, which is at the beginning, and then galvanize, which is in the middle. A lot of like entrepreneurs can tend to be wonder and tenacity. So they've got genius at the top end and then genius at the bottom end. So they have an idea and they can get it done. And then they find people to fill the gaps in between on their teams. It's really also dependent on industry, but a leader can really lead at any level. And it's really thinking about what is your profile and how can you then make the most of what your strengths is going to bring as a leader, but also what your gaps are, and thinking about hiring and bringing people on your team to fill those different gaps. So it can really kind of help you see that. And that's where it kind of plays into the whole idea of a team. When I say industry, I like to think about the aviation industry. You think about different parts of flying an aeroplane, different geniuses and skill sets might be applicable to different parts of that. So if I think about my pilot who's flying my plane, I think, what kind of geniuses do I hope my pilot has? And I'm probably thinking, I'm hoping they've got tenacity that they can land the plane. They can actually get us to where we're going. And I hope they've got discernment because along the way, some things might happen and they're going to need to make decisions and then they'll need to apply what they know to that. I probably don't necessarily need them to have a whole lot of wonder, which is sort of the creator. I don't need them thinking, I wonder what this lever does, or I wonder what it'd be like if we went there today instead. I want them to like get me to where I need to go. So that's with pilots. But then if I think about someone who's training pilots, you want someone probably who's got enablement, who can come alongside potential pilots and train them. If I was thinking of someone who was designing a pilot training program, I probably want someone who's got invention, who can actually, design a curriculum or design a process. If I was wanting someone who's recruiting pilots, then I probably want to think about someone who's got Galvanize, who's able to actually recruit and bring people into that process. And then if I was thinking about someone who's designing aeroplanes and thinking, what kind of airplanes should we have in the future? You want your wonder people. Think about what could planes look like or what could transportation look like in the future. And I think about, crew ministries, Campus Crusade ministries around the world. We need different skill sets at different stages. We need the people who are going to bring out the wonder and the invention and help us think about how we're going to reach the next generation. But then you also need your people who are really discerning and knowing what's good for now. How do we contextualize that? And then we still need people who've got galvanized, who are able to bring teams together. And then we need the operations people who are able to get things done. We need the coaches and the trainers who are able to come alongside with their enablement skills. So we actually need a whole lot, which means you can come back to your original question. As leaders, you can lead from any stage, but there may be different components or parts of any organization where your leadership might be more applicable given the tasks that that team is being asked to do.
Yeah. I really like that picture of just thinking through the aviation industry, like you just broke it down, of all the different parts and how different people with different geniuses could play a part in the whole aviation industry, but on these different levels. And then, yeah, that's so applicable to us in crew, how we can use them for those different parts. It sounds like you're saying that a leader can come with any set of working geniuses, but they kind of need to be self-aware of knowing what they bring to the table and what they need to rely on their team or what they need to bring out in their teammates to really be successful. In ministry settings, then, where resources and time are often limited, how can working genius help teams be more effective, but also help leaders steward people well and not just get results?
And so when it comes to helping teams be more effective in stewarding people, one of the key applications of working geniuses is thinking about the roles on your team. So often teams have informal or formal roles. So sometimes it can impact your formal role. So I've sort of described different components of work. So it may be that on let's say a campus team, if you've got people on your campus team who've got really strong tenacity, they might be the people that you get to plan the more detailed work. So if you're running a retreat or an event or an outreach, they're the best people often to get the organizational components of that done. But they may not be the best people to come up with the ideas of what you're going to do and where you're going to do it. And so if you think about your teamwork from that kind of a level, then you can assign different roles in your team. And so often thinking about the roles on a team, they can be formal roles or they can be informal roles. And that's where teamwork, the team leader can then look at it and go, oh, I think I'd really like to have this person work in this area because that seems to fit their genius better. And the team maps can really, really help people do that.
Yeah, I can see how that's so helpful of even just breaking down those different parts of a meeting or retreat or something that a campus team might be having, of some of that wonder invention of like, well, where are we going to go? What are we going to do? What do we want the outcome to be? Asking those questions, coming up with those ideas, but then having those enablement tenacity people to say, we can actually make it happen. That's really great. So whether or not a team has gone through the working genius, what's one mindset shift you'd want every listener to walk away with today when it comes to how they work?
Two, actually. So just mentioned different team meetings, and that's a key piece about the altitude is that they talk about each meeting has an altitude as well. So some meetings can be ground level meetings. They're like to get us done. What are we doing this week? What are we doing today? And then you're like offsite brainstorm ones are kind of your high altitude meetings. And that's a real one piece that a team can walk away. We often talk about leaders leaving a wake, like you're moving ahead and then you look behind and you look, oh, what's happening behind me? And Working Genius, Patrick Lencioni talks about leaders have a 2 times impact on their team. So if you're leading a team, your genius is going to have a double impact on your team than anyone else on the team. So because you're the leader, people are going to pay more attention to what you're saying and doing. That was when I was like having a lot of wonder moments in being creative. I'd come into my team meetings and I'd say, hey team, I've been thinking. And then my team would put their head in their hands and go, oh no, getting their heads around where we're at. And the leader's coming in with another idea. And so just being aware, so that whole self-awareness of behavior and thinking about your leadership and what is the wake that you're creating, your geniuses, the way that you kind of interact with your team, that's going to be having an impact on the team. And so just leading with that kind of awareness, I think is probably the aha moment, or, the one mindset shift is asking, what is the impact that I'm having on my team? And that's true for everybody on the team, but it's doubly true for team leaders.
Thank you for those takeaways. And I like that question. What is my wake as a leader? Because, you are going to naturally lead out of your geniuses. And so what is the impact of that? And so I think being self-aware, knowing when to really lean into that genius, knowing when to regulate it can be so helpful for teams. Well, Roger, thank you so much for your time today. And to find out more, they can always write the llama at crew.org. That's LLAMA at CRU.org. And thank you again for your time.
Yeah, thank you so much, Beth.
Thanks for listening. What is your next step based on what you learned today? If you lead a team, one simple next step might be this. Start the conversation. Ask yourself and your team, What kind of work gives you life? And what kind drains you? Those small conversations can shift culture over time, reducing frustration, increasing clarity, and helping people show up as their best selves. If you'd like to hear more about how you can implement Working Genius for your team, write to the llama at llama@cru.org. That's LLAMA@CRU.org. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.